The crash that changed everything. The night was supposed to be quiet. Ethan Carter had spent the last hour driving down an empty road, his old truck rattling as it moved over the worn asphalt. The radio played some distant rock song, barely audible over the wind rushing past. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Just another night. Just another drive home. Then the sky exploded. A streak of fire tore through the darkness, moving fast, too fast to be a plane. It wasn't a meteor, either. It was controlled, unstable, and it was falling. Ethan slammed his brakes. The truck skidded to a stop on the side of the road, tires kicking up dust. He watched, heart pounding, as the burning object crashed into the forest just ahead. The impact shook the ground, a deep boom echoing through the night. Birds scattered, trees groaned. Then, silence. Ethan sat frozen, his fingers still gripping the wheel. Every part of him screamed to turn around and leave. But instead, he grabbed a flashlight, shoved open the door, and ran toward the crash. The crash site. The smell of burnt metal and scorched earth filled the air. Smoke curled into the sky, mixing with the faint glow of embers. Ethan moved cautiously, pushing past branches, stepping over fallen logs. His boots crunched against the debris. Then he saw it. A ship. Not a satellite. Not a drone. A real, actual spaceship. Its surface was sleek, metallic but cracked, alien symbols glowing faintly along its hull. The crash had torn a path through the trees, leaving behind a smoking wreckage. Ethan's chest tightened. No one's going to believe this. A low, mechanical hiss came from inside the wreckage. Sparks spat from the ship's broken panels. A faint light flickered in the cockpit. Someone was inside. Ethan stepped forward, his heart racing. Then, a hand gripped the edge of the wreckage. A figure staggered out, collapsing to the ground. Ethan froze. It was a woman, but not human. Her skin shimmered silver blue under the moonlight, marked with faint glowing lines that pulsed weakly. She wore a sleek black bodysuit, torn and damaged, revealing deep wounds along her arms and side. Her hair was white, almost metallic, falling around her face, and her eyes, bright silver, locked onto his. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she gasped. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. Instead, she stumbled forward, toward him. Ethan instinctively reached out, his hand catching her just before she fell. The moment their skin touched, a jolt of heat shot through his veins. His vision blurred. His chest tightened. His breath caught. And then, his body collapsed. The bond awakens. Ethan's mind swam in darkness. He wasn't unconscious, but he wasn't awake either. He could feel something shifting inside him, a strange energy wrapping around his pulse, threading through his muscles. A whisper, not his own, echoed in his head. Not possible. He should not have survived. His eyes snapped open. The alien woman was kneeling over him, her hand pressed against his chest. The glowing lines on her skin had brightened, as if she had absorbed something from him. Ethan groaned, pushing himself up. What the hell was that? The woman flinched, her silver eyes sharp with confusion. She understood him. Then, to his shock, she answered, "You saved me." Her voice was soft but strained, like she wasn't sure how she was still alive. Ethan's head pounded. His body felt weak, as if something had drained him. But at the same time, he felt her presence, like something invisible had linked them. His stomach twisted. "What do you mean, saved you?" She exhaled, looking at him with something close to disbelief. "Your body. It gave me energy." Ethan stared at her. She had used his life force to heal herself. Before he could react, a noise cut through the forest. Footsteps. Not human. The woman's expression darkened. She pushed herself up, her body still unsteady. "They're coming." Ethan tensed. "Who?" Her silver eyes met his. "The ones who shot me down." A chill ran down his spine. He wasn't alone anymore. And whatever had just begun between them, it was only the start. A connection that shouldn't exist. The forest was no longer silent. A low, mechanical hum echoed through the trees. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. Something was searching for them. Ethan's heart pounded. He turned to the alien woman, who was still unsteady on her feet. Her silver eyes flickered between him and the direction of the sound. "We need to move," she whispered, her voice sharp with urgency. Ethan barely had time to process what had happened. The crash, the strange energy she pulled from him, the way his body still tingled from the contact. But survival instincts took over. "Come on." He grabbed her wrist and pulled her forward. This time, she didn't resist. "The hunt begins." They ran. The forest was thick, branches whipping past as they moved deeper into the darkness. The scent of burnt metal and smoke still clung to the air. Ethan's legs felt heavy, his muscles aching more than they should. Whatever the alien had done to him, it had taken something. But she looked stronger. Her steps were smoother, her breathing steady. Ethan clenched his jaw. What did she take from me? Then, a beam of red light cut through the trees behind them. Ethan ducked, yanking her down just in time. The blast hit a nearby tree, shattering the bark into burning splinters. What the hell was that? Ethan hissed. The alien woman turned her head slightly, listening. Then her expression hardened. Vraxian hunters. Ethan exhaled sharply. And what do they want? Her silver eyes flickered toward him. Me. A second blast struck the ground nearby, kicking up dirt and smoke. The pursuers were closing in. Ethan knew one thing for sure. They weren't getting out of this without a fight. Stronger than before, Ethan scanned their surroundings. They needed cover, a place to hide. Then he saw it, a small rock outcrop, half buried in the earth, large enough to provide temporary protection. There, he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward it. They slid behind the rocks, pressing low just as another blast tore through the air. Ethan's breathing was ragged, but something felt off. His heart was pounding, but not just from running. His skin was buzzing. His senses were sharp, almost too sharp. He could hear the subtle shifts in the forest, the quiet mechanical clicks of the enemies moving through the trees. He shouldn't be able to hear them. He shouldn't be able to feel them. What is happening to me? The alien woman studied him, her gaze unreadable. You're feeling it, aren't you? She murmured. Ethan swallowed. Feeling what? She hesitated, then slowly lifted her hand, fingers brushing over his arm. The moment her skin touched his, a pulse of energy surged through him. Ethan gasped, his body reacting instinctively. His vision sharpened, his muscles tensed like a coil ready to snap. For a split second, he felt like he could outrun anything, dodge anything, fight anything. Then, just as quickly, the sensation vanished, leaving him breathless. He stared at her, his pulse racing. What the hell did you do to me? She looked troubled. I didn't do anything. Ethan clenched his fists. That's a lie. She exhaled, looking away. I took energy from you when I crashed. It should have weakened you permanently. Ethan frowned. Yeah, well, I don't feel weaker. She shook her head. That's the problem. You should. Her silver eyes flickered with something he couldn't place. Fear, not of the Vrax, not of being captured. Fear of him. The enemy arrives. Before Ethan could push for more answers, the forest erupted with movement. A group of Vraxian hunters emerged, their tall, armored figures blending into the darkness. Their weapons hummed, glowing with energy. One of them, clearly the leader, took a step forward. His voice was mechanical, cold. Zayari fugitive, surrender now. Ethan glanced at the alien woman beside him. Zayari. So that was her species. She didn't move. The leader's gaze shifted to Ethan. And the human. Unnecessary. Dispose of him. Ethan's grip on his makeshift weapon tightened. Not happening. The lead hunter lifted his hand, a pulse weapon charging. Then the Zayari woman moved, faster than Ethan had ever seen. One moment, she was standing beside him. The next, she was a blur of motion. Her blade flashed through the air, cutting through the nearest enemy's armor. The Vraxian staggered back, roaring in pain. Another fired. She dodged, flipping midair, landing behind them. But Ethan wasn't just watching. He was reacting. A Vraxian lunged toward him. Ethan moved without thinking. His body was faster than it should have been, his reflexes sharper. The attacker swung his blade. Ethan ducked, countering with a brutal strike to the ribs. The impact sent the alien stumbling back. Ethan's own eyes widened. What the hell? That was too fast. Too strong. He looked at his hands, his breath sharp. The Zayari woman saw it too. Her silver eyes locked onto him. The bond is changing you. Ethan's stomach twisted. The experiment they tried to erase. Ethan moved like never before. The Vraxian soldier lunged at him, but Ethan reacted before he even thought about it. He sidestepped faster than he should have been able to, twisting at the last second and slamming his elbow into the alien's gut. The Vraxian stumbled back, stunned. Ethan didn't stop. He grabbed the enemy's wrist, twisting it with precision he shouldn't have possessed, then threw him to the ground. The cracking sound of armor echoed through the trees. What the hell was that? Ethan stared at his hands, his breath coming fast. His muscles tingled, his senses were sharp. He had fought before. He was a soldier once. But not like this. The Zayari woman was watching him. Her silver eyes weren't just surprised, they were terrified. This shouldn't be happening. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Ethan's heart pounded. What do you mean? Before she could answer, another Vraxian attacked. Ethan turned just in time, instinct guiding him. He caught the attacker's strike midair, his grip so strong it crushed the weapon's handle. The Vraxian snarled in shock, right before Ethan delivered a brutal punch to the side of his head, knocking him out cold. Silence. The remaining Vraxians froze, now hesitant to attack. They were afraid. Not of the Zayari. Of him. The truth revealed. The few remaining hunters retreated into the shadows, vanishing into the night. They weren't running away. They were regrouping. Ethan turned to the alien woman, his pulse still pounding. Explain. Now. She hesitated. Then, finally, she spoke. Your name is Ethan Carter. Human. Former soldier. Her voice was steady, but her expression wasn't. And yet you just moved like a trained Zayari warrior. Faster. Stronger. Ethan exhaled sharply. That's because you did something to me. She shook her head. No, I only took energy from you, but instead of weakening you, she trailed off. Ethan's jaw clenched. Instead of weakening me, I got stronger. The realization settled between them like a storm. She looked into his eyes. That means you weren't just a normal human to begin with. Ethan's stomach twisted. What did she mean? Then she turned, glancing toward the direction the Vraxians had disappeared. They didn't just come here for me. Her gaze met his again, more intense than before. They came for you. A past he never knew. Ethan ran a shaking hand through his hair. His body still felt charged, like the energy she had taken from him had somehow stayed. You're saying I'm what? An experiment? A freak? The Zayari hesitated. You're something the Empress tried to erase. Ethan frowned. The Empress? She nodded. The Zayari Empire ruled the galaxy long before humans even left their planet. But there was one thing we could never do, combine our abilities with another species. We tried. We failed. The project was shut down. Her silver eyes flickered. And yet here you are. Ethan's chest tightened. This wasn't just about her crash. This wasn't just about the bond. This was about him. You're saying I'm connected to a secret experiment from another species, that I'm some kind of mistake. She didn't answer right away, but she didn't deny it. The Vrax's return. A sudden high-pitched hum filled the air. The trees around them glowed red, an unnatural light casting eerie shadows. The Vraxians were back. But this time, they weren't alone. A massive black ship hovered above the treetops, its sleek hull pulsing with alien energy. A deep metallic voice crackled over the air. "Surrender the human. He does not belong to you." Ethan stiffened. He wasn't just a random soldier caught in an alien war. He was the target. The Zayari woman stepped in front of him. "If they take you, you'll never know the truth." Ethan clenched his fists. He didn't need to think. "Then we fight." She smirked. "That's the first thing you've said that sounds truly Zayari." The ship's weapons powered up. The ground shook, and the battle was about to begin. The hunt for the last hybrid. The Vraxian warship hovered above the trees, its sleek black hull humming with energy. The air itself vibrated, filled with a tension Ethan had never felt before. A deep mechanical voice echoed through the comms. "Surrender the hybrid. This is your only warning." Hybrid. Ethan's pulse spiked. The word hit differently now. He wasn't just some human caught in an alien conflict. He was something else, something they had been hunting for. The Zayari woman, Lyra, stood beside him, her silver eyes locked onto the warship above. "They know what you are. Asterisk, 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 and now. They won't stop until they have you." Ethan gritted his teeth. "Then we don't give them that chance." The Vraxian strike. The night erupted with fire. Red plasma bolts rained down from the ship, scorching the trees, turning the quiet forest into a burning war zone. Ethan and Lyra dived behind cover, just as the ground exploded where they had stood moments ago. More than a dozen Vraxian soldiers descended, their armor gleaming in the firelight. Their weapons glowed with lethal intent. "We can't fight them all," Ethan muttered. Lyra's expression remained calm, but her eyes flickered with something dangerous. "We don't have to." She lifted her hand, and the ground trembled. Ethan barely had time to react before Lyra moved faster than ever, a blur of silver and black. She rushed into the enemies like a ghost, her blade flashing. The first soldier didn't even have time to scream before he collapsed. The second raised his weapon, but Ethan was already moving. Before he even thought about it, his body reacted. He closed the distance in an instant, striking with strength that wasn't human anymore. The Vraxian slammed into a tree, unconscious. Ethan staggered back, his breath sharp. He shouldn't have been able to move like that. Lyra turned, watching him with an unreadable expression. "The bond is awakening your abilities faster than I expected." Ethan clenched his fists. "You're saying this is only the beginning." Before she could answer, a shadow loomed over them. The Vraxian commander had arrived. The Vraxian commander. Unlike the others, this one was larger, stronger, more dangerous. His armor pulsed with an unnatural energy, and his eyes, bright, glowing red, locked onto Ethan. "You were never meant to exist." The air itself seemed to thicken. Ethan felt something pressing against him, like invisible hands crushing his chest. He gritted his teeth, trying to fight it, but his vision blurred. His limbs felt heavy. Lyra moved instantly. She stepped between them, her voice sharp. "You can't take him." The commander's voice was cold. "You think I need permission?" His hand lifted, and Ethan felt himself getting pulled forward. Lyra's eyes flashed with fury. Then, she grabbed Ethan's wrist, and something exploded between them. A shockwave of golden energy erupted outward, sending the commander flying back, shattering trees. The other Vraxians stumbled, disoriented. Ethan gasped for air, the invisible force vanishing. Lyra looked down at her own hand where their skin had touched. The golden mark on her wrist was glowing, and so was his. The power of the bond. Ethan stared at his hand. The golden glow pulsed, sending waves of power through his veins. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. This isn't just a normal bond. Ethan exhaled, his pulse racing. Then what the hell is it? Lyra looked at him. It's evolution. A sound interrupted them. The Vraxian commander was rising. His armor was cracked, his body damaged, but he wasn't done. We will not lose you again. Ethan's chest tightened. Again. What did he mean again? But there was no time for questions. The warship above charged its weapons. The commander raised his blade. And Ethan knew. This fight was far from over. The secret they tried to bury. The Vraxian commander stood amidst the burning trees, his armor cracked, his glowing red eyes locked onto Ethan. But despite the damage, he smiled. You have no idea what you are, do you? Ethan's heart pounded. His body still buzzed from the golden shockwave that had knocked the Vraxians back. His muscles were tighter, stronger, his mind sharper. He wasn't the same man he had been an hour ago. Lyra stepped forward, her silver eyes flashing. He's not yours. The commander let out a low, distorted chuckle. He was never yours, either. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. The words hit too deep, too certain. Lyra didn't react, but Ethan saw the way her fingers curled into fists. She was hiding something, but now wasn't the time to ask. Above them, the Vraxian warship's cannons hummed to life. A final warning. Surrender the hybrid, the commander said, voice cold, or we burn this entire forest to the ground. Ethan exhaled sharply. He had two choices, run or fight. He clenched his fists. There was no choice at all. Come and get me. The unleashing. The Vraxians attacked first. They moved like shadows, fast, precise, lethal. But Ethan moved faster. The moment the first soldier lunged, Ethan dodged effortlessly, countering before he even thought about it. His body reacted like it already knew what to do. The second attacker swung a blade. Ethan caught it midair, twisted the weapon, and sent the alien flying. Lyra was right there with him, her silver blade dancing through the battlefield like a storm. But this time, she wasn't fighting alone. Ethan was matching her move for move. A burst of golden energy flared from his skin when he struck, sending enemies collapsing on impact. It wasn't just speed or strength, it was something more. Something ancient. Something the Vrax had tried to erase. The commander finally stepped forward. Enough. He lifted his hand, and Ethan's body froze. A memory that wasn't his. Ethan's mind exploded with images. Not his own. Flashes of a darkened laboratory. Figures in Zyari armor, standing over an unconscious human. Strange symbols etched into metal walls. A scientist's voice, distorted and broken. The first human Zyari hybrid. He's still alive. Ethan gasped, stumbling back. His chest burned. His veins felt like fire. Lyra turned to him, concern flashing in her eyes. Ethan, what's happening? He barely heard her. Because now he understood. He wasn't just some human caught in an alien war. He was the experiment they never finished, the one that was never supposed to survive. But he had. And now, the Vrax were here to correct that mistake. Ethan's hands trembled. Then, for the first time, he embraced the bond. His body stopped fighting it, and the golden glow around him exploded outward. The turning point. The Vraxian commander staggered back, his confident smirk vanishing. No, that's impossible. Ethan's eyes burned gold. His body was weightless and powerful at the same time. He turned to Lyra. She was staring at him like she had just seen a legend step out of a history book. Whatever you did to me. Ethan clenched his fist. It's done. He launched forward. The commander barely had time to react before Ethan slammed into him, his strength overwhelming. The ground shook with the impact. The Vraxian grunted, forcing Ethan back, but Ethan was already moving again. For the first time, The commander was the one struggling. The warship above tried to intervene. Its cannons fired, but Lyra lifted her hands. And this time, she called on the bond too. A shockwave of golden and silver energy collided, blasting the warship's attack out of the sky. The Vraxian forces stumbled, realizing they were losing. Ethan turned back to the commander. "Still think I don't belong here?" The Vraxian snarled. Then, he did something Ethan didn't expect. He laughed. "You think you're winning?" The commander rasped, blood dripping from his mouth. This was never about winning. Ethan's gut twisted. Something was wrong. The commander tilted his head, his red eyes glowing brighter. "You think you're the last hybrid?" Ethan's blood ran cold. "No." The commander grinned. "You're just the first one that woke up." And then, a second warship appeared in the sky. The war they tried to hide. The second warship loomed overhead, its hull blacker than the night sky, its energy cannons humming with lethal power. Ethan's pulse pounded. The first warship had nearly overwhelmed them. Now there was another. The Vraxian commander grinned, blood staining his teeth. "You thought you were alone," he rasped. "You thought you were the only one." Ethan's breath hitched. Somewhere deep in his gut, he already knew what the commander meant. He wasn't the last hybrid. He was just the first one to wake up. The second hybrid. The second warship's bay doors opened, and someone stepped out. At first, all Ethan saw was a shadowy figure, moving with unnatural smoothness, wrapped in Zayari battle armor. Then, the golden glow flickered around them, just like his own. Ethan's heart stopped. A hybrid. Another one. Just like him. The figure dropped to the ground, landing effortlessly. The moment they straightened, Ethan's stomach twisted. This wasn't just another experiment. This one had been trained. Unlike Ethan, this hybrid wasn't discovering their abilities for the first time. This one had been raised to fight. And now, Ethan was their target. The hybrid tilted their head, studying him. Their face was still hidden behind a battle mask, but their voice was eerily calm. "You don't belong here." Ethan clenched his fists. "You don't even know me." The hybrid took a slow step forward. "I don't have to." Then, they attacked. Hybrid versus hybrid. The world blurred. One moment, Ethan was standing still. The next, his body reacted on instinct. The hybrid rushed forward, moving faster than even the Vraxian warriors. Their golden aura crackled, their strength unmatched. Ethan barely had time to block the first hit, but the impact sent him slamming backward, his boots dragging trenches in the dirt. Pain exploded through his ribs. Too strong, too fast. This wasn't like fighting a Vraxian soldier. This was like fighting a mirror of himself. Lyra moved to help him, but the Vraxian commander held up a hand. "No," he smirked. "Let them finish this." Lyra's eyes darkened. "You think I'm just going to stand here?" she growled. The commander tilted his head. "Do you have a choice?" Ethan felt something shift. His body was weaker than the other hybrids. But something else was happening. Every strike, every movement, every dodge. He was adapting. He could feel it, deep in his bones. Every second, his reflexes got sharper. His attacks got stronger. His body was evolving mid-fight. The other hybrid finally hesitated, sensing it too. For the first time, Ethan saw uncertainty in their stance, and that's when he struck. His fist connected with their armor. A golden shockwave erupted from the impact. The hybrids staggered back, their aura flickering. Ethan stood taller, his breath steady. "I don't know who you are." His voice was calm, certain, "but you don't get to decide what I am." The hybrid's mask cracked. For the first time, they looked afraid. The Vraxian commander stepped forward, furious. Enough. The second warship's weapons powered up. Lyra's voice was sharp. "We need to get out of here. Now." Ethan didn't argue. The war was just beginning. The escape. Lyra grabbed Ethan's wrist. Instantly, the golden glow flared between them. Ethan felt the pull. The bond between them wasn't just a connection. It was a power source. And right now, it was their only way out. Lyra's silver eyes met his. "Trust me." Ethan barely had time to nod before the energy surged around them. And then, they disappeared. The resistance awakens. Ethan gasped, the world snapping back into focus. They were no longer in the burning forest. They stood on the edge of a cliff, overlooking an unfamiliar world. The sky was deep violet, twin moons glowing overhead. Strange ships hovered in the distance, their engines humming softly. Ethan turned to Lyra. "Where are we?" She exhaled. "The last place the Vrax would expect." Ethan frowned. "And where's that?" Lyra's eyes hardened. "The home of the resistance." Ethan's stomach dropped. There was a resistance. Before he could respond, voices echoed from behind them. Figures emerged from the shadows. Humans, Zyari, other species Ethan had never seen before. Some were injured, battle-worn. Others were armed, ready for war. And then, one of them stepped forward. Ethan's breath caught, because he knew that face. A human, older, scared, but unmistakable. His father. Ethan's chest tightened. His father had been missing for years. Dead. Or so he thought. The man's voice was hoarse, filled with something Ethan couldn't place. "Welcome home, son." The final stand. The moment Ethan locked eyes with his father, the world stopped. He was supposed to be dead, gone for years. Yet here he stood, battle-worn, alive, and waiting. Ethan's fingers twitched. 1,000 questions swarmed his mind, but only one left his lips. How? His father's gaze was steady, but his voice was heavy. "Because I knew this day would come." Lyra's breath hitched. "You knew about Ethan." The older man exhaled, glancing at the resistance fighters behind him. "I didn't just know. I helped create him." Ethan's chest tightened. He felt his pulse in his throat, in his ears. His own father was part of the experiment. The truth was right there, waiting for him to grasp it. But there wasn't time. Because the warships above had found them. And the Vrax were coming. The resistance rises. The sky cracked with light. The Vraxian fleet descended, their warships casting shadows over the cliffs. Ethan's instincts flared. His body was still charged from the battle, the energy in his veins burning hotter than ever. His father turned, his voice sharp. "We don't have much time. You need to understand. This war isn't just about you. It never was." Lyra's eyes darkened. "Then what is it about?" The ground trembled. Blazing red beams struck the earth, sending fire and debris into the air. The Vraxian forces landed. Thousands of them. A full-scale invasion. Ethan's father clenched his fists. It's about stopping them from activating the last hybrid army. Ethan's blood ran cold. "Army." His father turned to him, expression grim. "The Vrax never stopped experimenting, son. They didn't just make you. They made an entire force of hybrids." Ethan's breath caught. "How many?" His father's voice was hoarse. "Enough to wipe out every species in the galaxy." Ethan staggered. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was a war for the future, and he was at the center of it. The final battle begins. The first wave of Vraxian soldiers charge. The resistance fighters moved as one, battle cries tearing through the air. Lyra vanished into the fight, her silver blade flashing through the chaos. Ethan clenched his fists, and his golden energy exploded outward. He wasn't human anymore. He wasn't just a soldier. He was something the Vrax feared. Something they tried to erase. The first Vraxian soldier lunged at him. Ethan didn't move. He let the bond take over. And the moment the enemy reached him, Ethan struck. Faster than a thought, he dodged, twisted, and delivered a strike so powerful it shattered the Vraxian's armor on impact. The golden aura flared brighter. More Vraxians attacked. Ethan moved like a storm, his body in perfect sync with the power inside him. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of what he was becoming. He embraced it, and he tore through the battlefield like a force of nature, the face of the enemy. Above them, the Vraxian warships loomed, their cannons heating up. Ethan knew, if they fired, the resistance was over. They had minutes, maybe less. Then, a single figure descended from the warship. Not a soldier, not a commander. Someone worse. A woman in jet-black armor, taller than any Vraxian, her eyes burning crimson. Ethan felt it instantly. She was one of them. A hybrid. Her voice was calm. Too calm. You fight for the wrong side, brother. Ethan's breath caught. Brother? He wasn't the first hybrid. And he wasn't the last. The choice that will shape the future. The battlefield slowed. Lyra stood beside him, breathing hard, her silver eyes searching his. His father's voice was low, but firm. Ethan, this is it. Ethan exhaled. He had a choice, one that would decide the fate of every species. Did he run and let the galaxy fall? Or did he fight and become what he was always meant to be? Ethan lifted his gaze. The hybrid woman smirked. Are you ready to learn who you really are? Ethan's golden aura flared. He didn't need to answer, because the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The battlefield burned. The sky above cracked with fire and war. Ethan stood at the center of it all, golden energy pulsing around him like a storm barely contained. The hybrid woman watched him, her crimson eyes filled with something unsettling, recognition. You're not just one of us, she said, her voice steady. You're the first, and the last thing standing between us and domination. Ethan's fingers curled into fists. His father's voice echoed in his mind. This is your fight now. Lyra stepped beside him, her silver eyes unwavering. The resistance fighters waited. The Vraxian fleet hovered, ready to strike. Everything led to this moment. Ethan took a slow breath. The fear was gone. The doubt was gone. He knew who he was now, and he knew what he had to do. With one final look at the enemy before him, he smirked. Let's finish this. The sky erupted with war, and Ethan charged into destiny. The end